Today I want to talk about, well, I've called it impact, and what do I mean by impact? Well, I have a couple of questions. How do you do extraordinary things on a massive scale? How do you generate the maximum possible value for clients? And how do you get the most return from investment on culture or on our culture? These are my three questions, and we're gonna explore a way of answering these questions. So our first jumping off point, there are going to be two jumping off points into exploring the answer to this. The first jumping off point is here, to say, we love working here. Like, we love working at Grantry. And I don't just mean that we sort of love the idea of Grantry or we enjoy being part of a group of people. Like, there's actually something about doing work here that is in some way something that we find engaging or enjoyable. It seems to be true most of the time anyway, that we appreciate the experience of working here, both good and bad. Why is this weird? Why is this something that is any way worth remarking on? And I think that the answer for that is most people do not enjoy their jobs, right? Most people do not have that experience that doing work is something that they find enjoyable. And why is that? I think there are a number of things that come into play here. There is a lack of creativity that a lot of people experience in their jobs. And I just want to really underline that thing about creativity, right? We don't do necessarily something that people would think of as a creative activity or a detached activity. But there's something about being able to bring your creativity to bear in the work, whatever the work is, that makes the work enjoyable, or the opposite of that for most people makes it not enjoyable, right? So we get to bring our full creativity to bear. And there's also something about the fact that we're able to just get on with stuff, right? That we're not obstructed in a way that people are in a lot of organisations. And both of those seem to bring us kind of joy in our work. And just to kind of probe in a bit more about what's actually different at Grantry. The first thing for me is this, right? Sometimes, although I say, look, we enjoy our jobs, other people don't enjoy their jobs, let's acknowledge the fact that there are times that we don't enjoy our work. I mean, partly because we're just human beings and, life has these sort of natural sinusoidal curves. There are ups, there are downs, there are ups, there are downs, just forever. But also, there are aspects of our work that are painful or stressful, but I really want to draw a distinction between good pain and bad pain. In a sort of an exercising metaphor, good pain is the pain that you experience when you're actually doing exercise, you're building strength, and it hurts. Bad pain is when you're damaging your joints. So you have to be really careful if you're doing, sort of free weights or whatever, like, am I experiencing good pain here? Am I building muscle? Or am I experiencing bad pain? Am I damaging joints? Now, the sort of good pain that I think that we experience is things like, I find it stressful to update my pay. Well, that sounds really like good pain to me, because updating your pay is something that is really difficult, right? It's a big commitment to the organisation's resources. It's a really hard decision to make. It seems to me like experiencing stress is bugger off. Sorry. Just in the middle of a sentence. No. It seems to me that experiencing stress as part of that is sort of natural and normal, and I don't want to take that away. Or similarly, having an honest conversation with a client who's made errors on their tax return. That's a stressful conversation to have, but it seems to me like that's sort of stress that's natural and normal to that activity. And the reason why I want to stress that I think that these things are good pain is because I think that they, rather like the exercising metaphor, they involve growth. They are challenges that we face. We experience the pain because we're meeting a challenge. We're meeting something that we don't really know how to do yet. And I think that's great. I think that that is a really important part of working. And maybe another thing that's sort of an aspect of good pain is that, we use holacracy, and holacracy brings a lot of stuff to the surface. Like a lot of we're always aware of problems and issues that are happening. Right? That can be a painful process, being in an environment where things aren't allowed to dwell in the shadows and they come up and they're coming at us. Right? But that means that there is challenge, that means that we're facing them. So one of the things that I think makes this a great environment is the fact that we're able to face good pain, we're able to face challenge. And the second thing is, we are able to pretend to be Ferraris, right? That there is kind of no speed limit. And again, I want to think about holacracy. Like, it's very easy for us to say, you know, holacracy gets in our way. Oh, it gets in my way to have to look at Glass Frog and work out who's the person I should speak to. I don't want to do that. Okay, well, you know, fair enough that you feel that way. But also, I want to say, like, compare the ways that holacracy gets in your way to the way that most other ways of organizing teams and businesses gets in your way. Right? Think about the way that holacracy gets in the way versus the way that it gets in your way when, if you want to get anything done, you have to convince your boss, and she has to convince her boss, and then he has to convince his boss, etc., etc. You know? And instead we're saying, yeah, if you're doing something that isn't usually part of your job, and maybe you should just check in Glass Frog to see who the right person is, or that there aren't any, you know, domains or policies that apply. Seems like we actually have quite a lightweight way of getting in people's way. Like, I think when a team gets to a certain size, you do start getting in people's way a little bit, just as you know, sort of a product, the coordination of the size. But can you get in the way in a way that's quite lightweight and quite productive? But then the other thing that I think, the third thing is that allows us to have an experience of work where we love it, where most people don't, is connection. Now, this is a still from an experiment by a guy called Harlow. This is known as Harlow's monkey experiment, and this is some of the key data that led to attachment theory, or the kind of, it's part of the work around attachment theory anyway. And he did this experiment with monkeys where he made these two models, wire models of a monkey mother with a monkey infant, right? So it's actually sort of an experiment that you think, well, yeah, the ethics of taking infant monkeys away from their mothers to experiment on them. But anyway, we learned something from it. So he had these two models, and you can see, like, this model is sort of covered in a like soft furry coating and has kind of like a friendly, more monkey-like face. And this other one is just the wire frame and has a bit more of a stern face, but dispenses milk. So the infant monkey has two choices, which adult monkey model it wants to go to. Does it want to go to the model where it can get this feeling of sort of warmth and connection, or does it want to go to the one where it gets milk? Well, it's basically no surprise that what they discovered was they spent almost all of their time getting connection, and then occasionally they would hop over and get some milk and then go back, right? There's a really strong preference for connection. The need for connection is hardwired into the human experience, into the primate experience, into the animal experience. And that includes when we're at work, right? Just because we're at work doesn't mean that we get to uncouple ourselves from the way in which we're, you know, hardwired into our animal nature. So, you know, but ultimately, like, why does this matter? Why do we care about this? Why is it important to us to know about the fact that the need for connection is hardwired? Oh yeah, like, I want to address the fact that this is the need for connection is hardwired, but maybe what I haven't addressed is the fact that, like, I think we do experience a sense of connection here. Like, I don't think that everybody has to be best friends with everybody, right? But I think, certainly I know from my experience that there are people who I have met through working at Grantry who I can have conversations with, who I can connect with to a depth that I'm not really able to do with anybody else. And I don't necessarily mean all the time in the office, but some of the richest, most connected relationships that I have come from people that I've worked with here. And, you know, I make up that that's true, maybe not for everybody, but at least for some other people to have that experience. And certainly I would suggest that probably we all experience more connection and more depth in our relationship here than we ever have in any other working environment. That's definitely true for me. But why does all of this matter, right? Why does our hardwired need for connection matter? Why does it matter that we seem to address that need for connection here? And the answer is, for me, you know, there are two different ways maybe of presenting this answer. And the first is to say that there is an intimate connection along this pathway. The more that we experience connection, the more that we experience a sense of safety. In fact, I would suggest that these two things, connection and safety, are more or less synonymous. When people talk about feeling safe or feeling unsafe, I would suggest that what they're talking about really is, do they feel in connection or not? Do they feel that the connection that they're receiving is secure and stable? This comes back to them, oh, no, that's not the slide, that's not what I wanted to happen. Yeah, this comes back to the monkeys, right? This comes back to attachment theory, when we feel that the connection that we're in is strong and stable and secure, that it's not going to be withdrawn, that we can rely on it continuing, that's when we begin to experience a sense of safety. But just having safety on its own, okay, great, that sounds nice that we'd like to have safety, but actually, then here's another synonym for that, trust. When we talk about teams where there is trust or relationships where there is trust, again, I would suggest that means that's a relationship where there is a high degree of safety. Trust that we're really interested in, for reasons that I'll come on to later, sometimes goes under the name vulnerability trust. Maybe you've even heard me talk about that before in fundamental slots. But the thing about vulnerability trust is it's essentially saying, in this environment, how much do I feel that I can be open? How much do I feel that I can be myself? Now, the reason why these things are important, connection, safety, trust, which, are maybe all sort of the same thing, right? But of those things, connection seems to be fundamental, leads to our ability to be vulnerable, and it's vulnerability that leads to our ability to be creative. So I started out by saying, maybe one of the things that we get is the ability to be creative in work that other people don't see as creative. And I would argue that the fact that we have this, really strong culture of trust, the fact that we experience connection here, is intimately linked to that creativity. Because to be creative, we really have to bring ourselves into our work. We really have to be able to say, here are half-formed ideas that I'm having that may be good or bad. A lot of creativity is about like unlearning the way that we censor ourselves. Yeah, maybe you can believe that if you think about, sort of artistic activity, and again, the way that, children just seem to be able to sit down and draw a picture. And they almost don't seem to care whether the picture is good or bad. They just, put colour down, and then but yet somehow as adults we get blocked, and we're like, oh, I can never draw, I can never write, I can never sing, I can never dance. And it's like, what's that about? And it's like, oh, because we're afraid that what we're going to do is going to be shit, right? That it's going to come out, it's going to be half-baked, it's going to be terrible. But there's something about the more we feel this sense of connection, safety, trust, vulnerability, the more we can bring out stuff that's half-baked. And it doesn't just have to be singing, dancing, pictures, writing, blah, 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 blah. Because, there are because we bring our creativity to bear in our day jobs, right? So that there's something about being able to do that that's really fulfilling. And in fact, this is exactly the stuff that Patrick Lencioni talks about in the 5 dysfunctions of the team, right? That here are the things that high-performing teams have, according to Patrick Lencioni. They have high levels of trust, and the trust allows us to be really honest with each other, to surface our disagreements, to surface the way that we have differing opinions about stuff. We have healthy conflict. From that healthy conflict, all opinions get heard. We're able to have a shared commitment. Once we have a shared commitment, we can actually call each other to account on that. And all of this is still sitting on that fundamental bedrock of trust. Our ability to make that commitment, our ability to hold each other to account to the commitment that we've made. And it's only through these things that we get to results, shared results, which is, one of the things that really distinguishes a high-performing team from anything else is this focus on shared results. And for me, this is kind of what self-management is about, right? This is why we do self-management. In some ways, we maybe do it because we're just philosophically inclined to explore it, or because we're, anti-authoritarian, or whatever it is, right? Like, we all have our own interesting relationship to power. I know I do. Buy me a drink and I'll tell you about that. But the reason why we want to do self-management is because it allows us to do these things more fully. It allows us to be creative on behalf of the organization more fully. It expands the organization's creative potential as a whole, right? So, and in fact, we can sort of bring all these things together that we've been talking about, these 3 strands of experiencing good pain, having no speed limit and connection. To me, these 3 things and the interaction between them are what creates a high-performance team environment. And this is hardly a new idea that I've come up with, right? There's the Patrick Lencioni stuff, there's all of Google's work on what makes high-performing teams and the importance of psychological safety. That work is Project Aristotle, if you want to look it up and find out about it. But the interaction of all of these things create the high performance team environment. It's not like, oh, isn't it great that we have all of these things so we can have a wonderful experience of work, fantastic, you know, let's all go home feeling warm and happy. There's more here, right? The fact that we have these things is what allows us to achieve, is what allows us to maximize what we can achieve as a group together. Okay, so that was sort of the first jumping off point. Here we're going to come to the second jumping off point, and they're going to kind of come back together, these two strands, okay? So the second jumping off point is this. You know, let's not talk too much about the culture. Let's not focus too much on the culture in our external materials, in our blogs, in our positioning. You know, that's definitely something that I'm hearing. You know, and I wonder, like, what do we really mean by that? And then here's another thing that we say, like, oh, we can't spend too much money on the culture, we're already spending too much money, why would we consider doing this if we're already spending too much money? What do we mean by this? Now, I wonder if in both cases, we mean something like this, right? Now, I love treats as much as the next person, you know? I genuinely do, but I wonder if when we say let's not talk too much about it, let's not focus too much about it, we spend too much money on it, if what we're thinking about is snacks and outings, right? But here's the thing, the culture is not snacks and outings.
Wow.
Well, I mean, it really, you know, it really isn't, right?
I'm just about for a snack outing.
Yeah. The culture is about making work awesome. And if we, I mean, the more that we focus on this, the more that we lose our ability to answer the kind of three big questions, I think. Because the culture is about making work awesome, right? And this is kind of where we came in, right? Like, lots of people do not enjoy their experience of work, and we do. And we enjoy working here, we love working here because we can just get on with stuff. There's no speed limit. We're able to face new challenges, we're comfortable with good pain, we're in an environment where we can experience good pain, and we're in an environment where we feel connection, we can be creative, and you can see maybe the interaction between those things, how, you know, the ability to experience good pain sort of leans on connection, and so does creativity. But on the other hand, when we want to be creative, we have to face new challenges. Creativity is about bringing new stuff into being. So there's a sort of an intimate link between those three things that for me is about, making work awesome. So, you know, we have a high performance team environment. We have a sort of a philosophy that you should have everything that you need around you to get your job done, and if you don't have it, it should be easy for you to get it. You know, think about how hard those things are in lots of other organizations to just get simple things that you need, like, I mean, I've experienced working in places where it's hard to get a pen, you know, just like a £1.50 pen. And you think, I mean, it just seems just ludicrous to put those obstacles in people's way of having the things that they need. So what we want to do is we want to make work awesome, but then having sort of created the conditions for awesome work, we then actually have to go and do some awesome work as well, right? It's not just enough to say, oh, we have this high-performing team environment. We then actually have to go out and become a high-performing team. And that's in some ways the hard part, right? Is the actually going out and acting and doing it. And for me, like, awesome in this context, like, what is awesome work? Awesome work is work that's it's awesome for you, it's awesome for us, it's awesome for the client. You know, and that these things are not mutually exclusive. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not that somehow, you know, if we have fun, we don't get to do good client work. Like, we should be aspiring to do, I think, both of those. So if the culture is really about making work awesome, and if making work awesome is really about doing awesome work, when we say, let's not talk too much about the culture, or let's not focus on the culture, we're kind of saying, let's not talk too much about, I missed the word much, but never mind. Let's not talk too much about our awesome work, which feels kind of really weird that we would say that. Like, no, let's not focus too much in our positioning with our clients about how awesome is the work that we do. So how did we end up here? Like, how do we end up in this position where it sort of seems to us like, you know, the culture is like a problem or something to be hidden away, or that it's an obstruction more than it is something that supports us? And I really think that the answer to this question, well, the question that I want to ask, this is a great question to ask, you know, what stops us fully showing up? You know, why do we hold back? What keeps us back? And for me, the answer is, shame. That there's some way in which actually we're a bit ashamed of the culture, that it's somehow, like we can't quite be proud of ourselves in this way. Like, I certainly look inside myself and I find that. So I make up that I'm not the only one who feels that way. And I really want us to, kind of face up to this, because I think this shame holds us back from unleashing our full potential on the world. And I think that we can work to fix this in discovering our edge. I think maybe part of the reason why we get caught up in saying let's not focus too much on the culture in the way that we position ourselves in the market is because we haven't discovered for ourselves the way in which our culture isn't just, snacks and outings, isn't just about us feeling good, but is actually about being a high-performance team environment. And we haven't fully discovered for ourselves the way in which being a high-performance team environment is something that is really awesome for our clients. I'm sure there are a whole load of ways that we could, just, trivially, if we think about, okay, if we wanted to blog about this, if we wanted to write about our culture, and I by no means think it should be the only thing that our positioning is built on. I by no means think it should be the only thing that we talk about publicly. But for goodness sake, yes, let's talk about it publicly. But let's talk about it publicly in a way that focuses on the stuff that the clients are going to care about, which is like, why is this good for them? What do they get out of it? And that, there must be lots of ways that we can find the stories that we can begin to build, to share with the clients and to share with ourselves, that give us a sense of how we can find our edge through our culture, through our self-management, through our high-performing team environment. And I think that sort of something in that discovery process it's like, at the moment we sort of say, well, we can't focus on culture with the client, so we can't see how it benefits them, so they can't get the benefit out of it. Like, we're sort of stuck in this loop. Actually, our ability, like the shame that holds us back from really talking about this with them, is the thing that actually holds them and us back from together getting the most out of it. And I think we could shift to a more like positive reinforcement loop in which we become willing to talk about this, we become willing to engage in it, and so that we actually start to get the most benefit out of it for them, right? And for me, what this means is, well, one of the things that it means is, giving our clients what they really need. So there's something about, if we come back to this idea of connection, vulnerability, trust, etc., the thing that gives us the strength, the thing that is the bedrock of our teamwork internally, this can also be the bedrock of our teamwork with our clients. We can be with the clients in their world. We can come to understand them and what they need. And maybe because we have, because we're so good at this already ourselves, we can do this better than other people. We can come to understand our clients better than other people. We can work together with them as a team to, co-create the products, the services that they want. But not just the products and services, even for products and services that already exist. We can co-create the projects with the client. Like, how does this particular client want this project to go? Like, how can I, is this a client who wants literally no interaction at all and it's just, in and out, or do they need something else? What do they need out of it? I think we have, tremendous potential here in sales, in delivery, to leverage the way that we work together and start to bring our clients more into that. And, we're doing it already, right? We're doing it already. So one of the shifts is just in seeing that we do it already, and that seeing that our culture plays out in those client relationships already, and beginning to celebrate that and beginning to see that that's as much a part of the culture as all of the other things. But then there is another aspect of this, which is, giving ourselves what we really need as well. Like, we have these big strategic questions that we're going to face, these points of good pain, these challenges that won't go away. How are we going to prepare for Brexit? What are we going to do as the tax credit market becomes more squeezed? What future products and services are we going to offer? How are we going to diversify? How are we going to scale the grants business? Do we want to internationalize? All of these kinds of questions. And to me, the way that we face these questions effectively, like it's almost like there comes a moment, and I'm not saying that this happens for everybody or that it happens all of the time, but certainly there seems to come a moment for sort of me when I think about it, where I'm like, oh, the enormity of these problems, and I think, where will I go to find a solution? How will we ever engage with these problems? And I'm just not looking close enough to home. Like, it's the stuff that we know about, it's the stuff that's obvious already, it's the culture that we have, it's the way that we work. It's the fact that we have an environment where everybody, the conditions are right for everybody to be creative on behalf of the organisation because there is connection. We've taken obstacles out of people's way so people are free to express that creativity because there's no speed limit. And in the process of doing that, there will be individual growth as we face the challenges because we're capable of experiencing good pain. So how do we address these big questions? We lean on the stuff that we have already. We lean on the strengths that we have already in our client relationships, in our commercial thinking, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I want to say. As a final sort of postscript, coming back maybe to Richard's point earlier about, is it about snacks and outings? Well, let's think about snacks and outings just for a moment. Like, how much did we really spend on them in the last financial year? So just popping into zero. Over the course of the year, in these three categories, internal meetings, staff welfare and entertaining, we spent, £20,000. Now that's a lot of money for an individual to spend on, snacks and outings. But in the context of the company, how much have we actually spent? Well, assuming a total revenue of about 3 million, we spent less than 1%. Or per person per year, sort of going on for £700. Now what we maybe have to ask ourselves is, what benefit do we get out of this? And if a benefit that we get out of this is that these kinds of snacks and outings help us create the experience of connection, which leads to the creativity, which allows us to understand the client and to work with the client, which allows us to meet the strategic challenges head on and to solve them, then maybe £700 per person per year is not a bad investment by the business of its resources in creating those conditions. Now, I'm not saying that we, God knows, I have my views about snacks, but, I'm not saying that we shouldn't revisit that number. I'm not saying that we can't make savings, but I'm just saying, let's think about, why do we do those things? What is the benefit? Let's have the end in mind. I mean, let's not make, you don't always have to have an end in mind. Sometimes just enjoy the snacks and outings. But when we think about why are we doing this, how much is it actually worth us spending on this? Let's think about what it's achieving for us. So, some exploration there, and now we can maybe come back to these questions. How do you do extraordinary things on a massive scale? I would argue it's through high-performance team environments, How do you generate the maximum possible value for clients? That's about discovering the outward focus of our culture. It's including the clients in our awesome teamwork. It's using our strengths fully in the engagement with the outside world. And discovering for ourselves what that means, how those strengths that we sort of know and feel internally translate into what we're already doing externally, starting to tell ourselves that story. And finally, how do we get the most return on investment for our culture? It's about taking full advantage of what we have. We have those conditions for awesome work. We know that we have the ability to bring creativity on behalf of the organisation in a way that almost nobody else in the world does. We are really, really fortunate in this respect. Let's utilise this strength. Let's really make the absolute most of it. And, let's go forward into a really awesome 2018. Any questions? Or comments?
I think this is amazing. I'm really glad that you've articulated it so well, and I agree with it 100%. That's my comment.
Great. Thank you.
I think it's interesting how it's completely different to other high-performing teams. And an example I'd use would be Project Manhattan, in 1940, where Oppenheimer was given a carte blanche to bring in the best scientists and invent the nuclear bomb, and he was under insane pressure to deliver something as quickly as possible. And I think the way the grant is set up is there's very little pressure at all, but there's similarities in that we're trying to hire the best people, form a team, and produce something as quickly as possible that's as good as possible. So it's interesting how there are similarities and there are differences. And I think the most interesting thing for me in the future is if there is an external pressure where we have to adjust very rapidly, is how the team performs in the face of that pressure.
Yeah, I think that point about pressure is really key, right? In terms of, how do we do this? Like, how do we take full advantage of what we have? And I think that the answer is by really leaning into the opportunity that we have to, like, feel the good pain. Like, if people say, I feel stressed about, the shape of the tax credits team, or like how it is that we, all of these things that you guys have going on at the moment, in your team about like, how is it that we continue to make money given that we have, sort of skilled high value resources, what do we do, what's happening? Like, this seems to me to be great pressure to experience, because it pushes us to be our best. And Dan, you were talking about this on Tuesday as well, about like like creating a frame and being like, here is the pressure. So there's sort of something about like not allowing ourselves to get caught up in what lots of businesses do, which is to create a lot of artificial what by when, right? Because like, and do we all get like why that's a bad thing? Like what the potential downside of what by when is because it distracts us from adding real value, in the sense that we've got caught up in this list of things that we have to do by certain dates, and we're becoming blind to looking at saying, well, actually, okay, well, never mind. Well, like, how many of these dates are movable? How many of these things, really are is there actual pressure on? Because otherwise, we're just focusing on delivering stuff by dates that we've just promised to each other artificially, rather than saying, well, actually, something more important for the business has now come up. So, it's not that deadlines are bad, but it's that they can be distracting from us always being able to prioritize where we add value. So there's something about saying, yes, sometimes having that sense of pressure and maybe engaging more ourselves with the challenge of bringing that pressure to bear internally. Like, there's something about that as a sort of an expression of power or authority that maybe runs slightly counter to ways that we've been before, and that seems to me like a really interesting exploration. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I feel like you're going to say.
Yeah, I kind of want to add a bit more. I feel like maybe I'm repeating myself about the whole urgency and purpose thing. That thing that I observed in the start of us last year was these teams operating under conditions where they knew what they were doing, they knew why, and so they had a purpose and they had the urgency of doing it in a few days, and they did really awesome work, and they felt really good. They built really strong connections. Except a couple of teams that sort of blew up because they had too many problems internally to actually handle it. But the thing is, those teams only lasted like 4 or 5 days. We're doing this for years, so we need to have much more, like, it takes a lot more effort to create this sort of awesome environment here than it does in a team that's only going to last for 4 days. And it occurred to me, like, talking about urgency, we do have actually non-official deadlines that occur quite regularly, like, for clients. Claim filing deadlines, grant filing deadlines. And it is perhaps a symptom of this awesome culture that enables us to go and meet that urgency that I'm not aware that we've ever missed a deadline because of us. Like, sometimes the client just goes away and just doesn't give us any data. But even so both in tax credits, where we sometimes get the data at a very late time, and in rather dubious state, or in grants, where, let's face it, clients sometimes are like really, really unreliable, and I keep hearing about clients coming in with last-minute comments like an hour before the Innovate UK filing deadline, and somehow we always meet those, which tells me that the team is high performance, and when there is real pressure, we do meet it, and maybe now we're getting more broader pressure from the environment as the tax rates market gets more competitive.
So there's something about, like, because there are real world external deadlines on the client work,
Yeah.
and anything that we want to do, like this sort of strategic question of saying, how are we going to shape ourselves, how are we going to, all these kind of things. Well, they don't have
Yeah.
so many real world deadlines.
Yeah, and
And this was exactly the issue with the grants team, that it was like, we have to look at a new business model, but we always have these client deadlines. Okay, well, I'm going to actually have to create a deadline that feels like it has the same, so that it can be prioritized together.
yeah, and it feels like, I just want to point out, it feels remarkable to me that there is nobody who's in charge of making us meet these deadlines. There's nobody whose job it is to make sure that every tax credit claim gets filed on time. It's something we all take collectively as a team, as a responsibility. Similarly for grants, there's nobody who's the deadline manager. And I guess in a more traditional, more forceful environment, there'd be somebody whose job it is to make sure that they're managing the deadlines.
Mm.
We don't need that because we're all being aware of this, and somehow, despite the lack of that role, we still meet every deadline.
Yeah, I also want to pick up on the other thing that Chris, you started by talking about the Manhattan Project team, and just something that maybe this wasn't what you were saying, but it sort of popped into my head when you were saying about assembling, individually the best scientists, and actually, I have definitely seen a couple of recent studies on teamwork that actually suggest that the sort of superstar approach to teams is less effective. Like if you have lots of people who are individually very strong performers and you assemble them into a team, you actually get performance that's less good than if you have people who are maybe not individually as strong but who are able to work together more effectively. So that synergy effect seems to be really strong, and that's some of what the kind of hype, like the Patrick Lencioni stuff, is about. I mean, the example for me that comes to mind is I think of I just really love this example. The British rowing teams, when they won, they did very well at the Olympics. Was it last year? 2016 was the Beijing Olympics last year.
They've been doing really well for about 12, 16 years.
But I remember, but there was an Olympics last year, a Summer Olympics last year.
Yeah.
We won some medals and they were being interviewed, and they had them in the the sort of funny long BBC sort of sofa. They have this, they've got a big team, and I love this interview that they were, the presenters just saying, well, this must mean an enormous amount to you personally to have won this award, and they basically asked this same question of everybody, and everyone was just like, no, this is really this is about the team, there are 8 or there are 9 people in the boat, because they all just kept talking about the cocks, which I thought was fantastic, because it's an 8-person boat, it's an 8-person race, it's called the men's 8s or the women's 8s, but they're all there's 9 people in the boat, and then there's the coaches, and then there's everybody who we trained with all the way through the years who didn't make it to the Olympic squad, and everybody was just it was the first thing that they wanted to say in the interview was, this is a team result, this isn't about me. And I thought, oh, Patrick Lencioni. They're clearly being coached in a way that philosophically is about, we all collectively focus on the overall success of the team. That relies on those other things. But it just gives you such a fulfilling experience because the bedrock is trust and connection. You feel part of the team, and so even if, and you genuinely do begin to just feel the successes of other people. It seems to be a really great way of doing stuff. It's occurring to me now, and I do want to point it out, even though it's a bit awkward, which is it's one of these things that actually doesn't sit very well with the way that holacracy works automatically, which is holacracy is very much focused on individual achievement. It's the way that the tactical module works in holacracy is not very much focused on collective achievement, and it's one of the most significant drawbacks to it as a system. There are lots of other things that I think that it does extremely well and that make it extremely useful for us, it teaches us about the preference of explicit over implicit, and it teaches us about holding our boundaries effectively, and not fixing our own problems, and so on, which I think is all great and really powerful, as well as the way that it gives us clarity over rules and roles. But it's not very good at pointing us to focus on collective achievement. So that's maybe something to to think about, particularly as maybe, you know, in tax credits, you're redesigning your workflow board, thinking about how you might want to work differently. I know the grants have also thought about this, and like, you know, whether other methodologies, like things like Scrum or Less or whatever, we can bring together. I mean, I know in some ways I get wary about this, and, you know, like when I talk to Stephen Kuhn about this, they're like, oh, you know, don't bring in other stuff until you've got the most helpful accuracy, but I mean, I still just want to find that up to people.
I want to talk about when you said earlier that, like, sort of the reason why we're not talking about our culture with our clients, and how, like, when you were talking about why, like, my answer was, like, you were articulating the answer in my head was the shame and like, the fear that if I talk to our clients about, this is amazing, like, you know, we get flexible, like, everything I can do, like, you know, like, well, what do you need? I can get that done for you. Like, I don't need to ask anyone for permission. It's just like, do you need a referral? Do you need this? Do you need an introducer? Whatever, I'll do that. But somehow, I am afraid of telling them because I'm afraid of their judgment, that they're gonna think that we're just a bunch of young people that are like sort of defying authority that they so respect. Like, what if they are, like, you know, the very traditional kind? How would they view us? Would they deem us as just, you know, silly or yeah, or a bunch of hippies and like lose respect for us?
I think as well, to pick up Greenie, there's a, you know, there is this issue of the fact that the semantics of the word culture in business has been ruined over the last 20 years. And actually a lot of businesses, traditional and relatively new and young, view culture as snacks and outings and unlimited holidays. And actually the fact that those feed into high performing teams because of the ability of people to make connections is lost. So as soon as you start talking about culture, we have a great culture here, the immediate, or in my experience, the immediate thoughts are things like flexible working holidays, snacks, outings, you know, fun.
Yeah.
And actually the sort of business world, the world of business bullshit, is this great book that's just come out about it actually. In the world of business bullshit, which is frankly prevalent, culture does not mean high performing teams. And using it as a positioning device or a lever for positioning our products and our services is difficult when the reception is against what we mean. So there is a sort of clash of meanings, which may well be changing. There may well be a sea change in the sort of wider world, where actually the notion of culture, particularly the cliche, and frankly we sadly live up to every single cliche. Cliches are cliches for a reason.
We don't have a table for more.
We've got a dartboard though.
And we've had a pool table.
Yeah, maybe worse, I don't know.
I've got
The pool table is somewhere.
We used to have it, we got rid of it.
Oh, we've got
No
rid of
pool
it.
table. Yeah.
Not that,
Didn't realise that.
but you know what I mean? It's something that actually it's very hard to break down that initial perception.
Yeah.
Because you're using a word which is so loaded and so, it's so loaded from so many people.
I think that makes complete sense, and I think that, you know, the trust that you're talking about in the presentation, that trust is built up internally, and I guess, you know, the trust is built up with clients through them successfully getting what they need, but until they get what they need, is there a way to kind of connect the way that we do it with success before they really see that through?
Like, I wonder if maybe the term culture by itself doesn't serve us. And
Yeah.
if we call it high performing culture, for example, suddenly like it feels a little bit closer to the mark. Like, I wouldn't feel ashamed to say to our clients, we have a high performance culture. Like, we make sure that our people have all the tools they need to like deliver exactly what you need. That feels like a stronger pitch already. And then the way that the positioning pitch occurred to me was we're like an early version of, sorry, echo is going on. Sorry, can you stop?
I'm also mute.
That's strange, so it's muted, isn't it?
I know you're active at the bottom as well.
I've somehow managed to get logged in twice.
There
Okay,
you go.
but is our remote people still on now?
No.
Okay.
Technology.
It's always the same, isn't it? The minute the discussion starts,
Yeah.
it's just a shit.
We had a discussion for a little while before you joined us, but yeah.
Like the terminology is what you're.
Hold on, let's just let those remote people be back in. I hate it when
Hey,
remote.
It's, you read it and can you?
Right, can you guys hear us?
Sorry about that, guys. Some sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So what I was saying, like the way the positioning thing occurred to me was this idea that we're kind of like an early version of the Borg. Like you're dealing with this kind of branching hive mind. Like you said, like let's bring that back to reality. But like that certainly is not a pitch about fucking ping pong tables.
Mm.
It's a pitch about like you dealing with like people who are collaborating in like a next level sort of way. That's maybe close. Like so maybe it's a question of how we pitch, like and getting away from the word culture towards something else.
Yeah, I want to.
Can I introduce a counter position to that?
If you want.
So am I right in thinking one of our strategic aims is to grow and to obtain market share? I mean, we have a strategy to, basically grow to 5 million in sales over a given period or something like that. Whatever the kind of thing is. I mean, there's been an emphasis on growth.
There's like we have desire to grow. I don't think we have a strategic goal to grow.
Okay.
Like I'm not gonna remember phrasing this as a strategic goal. Like not in recent time. Like 3 years ago, we had something that presentation ages ago.
So I mean that somewhat takes away from it. I mean, what I was going to say, but I mean, we have two competitors that have started at a similar period in time to us, Leighton and Forest Brown. One of which is 3 times larger, and one of which is 4 or 5 times larger. How do we feel that the culture might have impacted our ability to achieve what they have done, to spread our message further and wider? Do we feel that we've been hampered by it, or do we think that we're, as an organisation, looking to achieve something different to them, which is growth? What I'm trying to say is if the objective is growth, have we failed? We've become in the same market as these people at the same time. If the objective isn't growth, are we explicit about that? I don't think we are.
I get a bit torn here because I know that you had something that you wanted to say, Quaker, which was. I don't want that to get lost because maybe the discussion's about to move on. This sounds really interesting, but it also sounds like it's about to shift us in a different direction.
Yeah, definitely have some thoughts on this side of things as well. But what I was going to say is, I think that the message that we give to external parties massively should change depending on that external party. So I understand that whilst the client that pays for our services, there are some quite specific things about our culture that they might view as, these guys have a lot of money to spare, therefore maybe the fees that I'm being charged aren't, whatever, right? That it's quite practical, like A plus B equals C, right? The partner conversations though, for example, the people who aren't necessarily procuring services from us, I find talking about our culture like really useful. It's a high value thing that makes us, that maybe not just makes us out to be, which presents us as some people that are operating on a very different level. I've just been with Barclays just now, and the conversations that I've had with one of them, they've then had with lots of their people saying, bloody hell, there are these guys that are doing this amazing stuff. And it basically shows us to be operating in a very kind of abstract manner that they basically don't understand. That is actually quite valuable, because if what you don't understand but is successful, is almost like, okay, maybe these guys have the right idea. So I guess there's like a few ways of pitching it to different parties, but yeah, I think that was my point.
Yeah, I want to wrap that up, and before we just jump back into what Will was saying, which is I just want to come back to this slide about how we get the most benefit out, and just discovering what it means to. I mean, and as Dan says, maybe the word culture, or as Richard was also saying, like maybe the word culture isn't helpful here, but it's the word that we've picked. Like historically, that's the word that we've picked. So,
I mean, look back at sort of the Arch semi-edition, Raymond Williams' keyword as culture is to grow. That's it. That's
Culture is to grow.
Culture means to grow. That's what it is.
Okay.
let's not get lost in semantics. which is
Semantics, that's
the
the
word that you were looking for the other day. Yeah. Sorry. No. Yeah. So, but this process of discovery, what does it actually mean for us to get the most out of this for our clients? You know, what is and it's, as you were saying as well, Greenie, some people will be really receptive to that, but then some people don't want to know about it. You know, great. Okay. So, you know, talking about this externally at the moment is difficult because we don't know how to do it. It's like we don't have the language for it. Like, what's appropriate for us to say externally? What are the messages that actually give the people that we're talking to information that they care about rather than the stuff that we care about, but that draws on our strengths and the stuff that we care about? But that to me, that's sales. You know, it's like here's the stuff that we care about authentically, and now we come and meet you and the stuff that you care about authentically, and we orchestrate the two of those meetings skillfully. To me, that's
I don't really know what that means.
Okay.
As someone who's sold a lot of contracts for this company, my experience is that clients care about who's doing the work, your track record, and the price. To me, the culture is something, and my understanding of culture in an organisation is a system of joint held beliefs that impact the way we interact. That's basically my feeling is that, you know, the culture, as it were, is something that comes across tacitly. You know, it's something that, you know, people will say, hey, those guys are really nice. You know, they have a great culture. I think the moment we start talking about it in order to win business, and I'm particularly thinking about it in a competitive scenario, I really struggle to think of scenarios where it would add value to that conversation and add value to making a client choose between, you know, ourselves and a competitor. You know, in something that means something that's financial for them. So, you know, either paying us more or winning. So
I really want to check in that I feel a bit defensive of the discussion because I think Andrew spent about 40 minutes talking about this, and you weren't. I don't want to shame you for the fact that you were busy with other stuff.
yeah,
Exactly, it's totally fine. But we did spend 40 minutes talking about that, and it feels like you're we've been talking about this already, and you're saying, well, I don't see this, but it was being talked about as well. So I feel like it's
okay.
unfair.
I was here at the start.
But I wanna maybe look back and say, look, when you say that you can't imagine situations in which that would be helpful, that's almost exactly what I'm pointing to, which is like at the moment we can't imagine it. How would we actually take the thing that represents our biggest strength as an organisation and talk about it to the client in a way that translated it into something that was important to them?
Yes, that's the question I'm asking.
Yes, exactly that. Well, that's the question that I'm posing for us collectively, that I think that there is power in us engaging with that.
Have you not? I mean, I know I have in sales situations leveraged the fact that, you know, we're a team where we can move in and out of being your lead contact, and actually because of the way we've set up our internal communication systems, it means that anyone can drop in and out. And I know when we worked with Recycling Technologies, they were very aware of the fact that when Nikki went on holiday, it didn't matter because I picked it up, but that didn't matter because they could talk to James anyway, and actually they could also talk to you about things. And actually there was the fact that we had this fluidity of team, and there was they were satisfied that there was sufficient internal communication, that there was no one person who held the power to say yes, no, stop, go. No one had to check in with anyone, because they understood that we were operating in a way that meant that their point of contact at any one point would be fully briefed and fully capable of delivering their work. That's quite an interesting way of...
In grants, certainly yes. In tax credits, that doesn't really tend to be the reality. You know, someone's going on holiday, they don't take on a critical piece of work. You know, projects tend to be much more, the timeline is poorly defined. I mean, basically no, because it's not brilliantly relevant to the conversations we're having. And that to me is more like a system of managing workflow. It is part of making, you know, everything's part of culture, right? But I don't directly draw the line between, you know, that and where we are. And the grants team is very different from the tax credit team as well. I think that's more true in the tax credit, in the grants team.
I think
I
one
mean-
aspect, sorry.
I mean, I just remember Amy's example. Amy, are you online?
Yeah.
Like where she was sharing,
Yeah.
having a conversation with a client at 11 in the evening, because that's where the client was. I feel like I remember in Barclays, it just wasn't possible for me to have a client at 11 p.m. because phone calls had to be recorded, and I had to be on a landline recording conversation for me to have the conversation I wanted to have. Like there were all these red lights and all these like red tapes that I just don't see here. And it shows up in our team as well in the way we move when I hand over stuff. I know it will be taken care of. My clients know that they will be taken care of. Which is not just, which is a component of the culture, being able to talk with a client at 11 in the evening that just wasn't in Barclays. That just wasn't my experience.
I struggle to believe that if PwC were delivering the same piece of work, they would refuse to meet any of the client's demands. I can't believe that's the case. I feel like I'm sidetracking the discussion.
But you are pointing to something important. So that's the question we are holding. That's the tension Andrew was bringing as well. We don't have the answer. So we're sitting with the same question. So you're right. But like I feel like we are holding pieces of the puzzle that we're not coming together. Like you feel this connection with the work we're doing as tax creditors. So you are speaking to something real. So I mean, and
I want to give an example. You said PwC wouldn't do this. I mean, just ask whoever's had to deal with Barclays and their accounting system. Like how great service they give to a corporate customer that passes millions of pounds through their system every year. Well, they give us the worst service that you can possibly imagine. I don't see how they could possibly do it worse. And that's because of their culture. Because if they had a grumpy style of culture there wouldn't be this case of calling them up and saying, well, just submit this form and somebody will get back to you sometime. No, I can't do anything to help you. Sorry. You just need to click on these buttons on the system that doesn't work. And it's a nightmare to do. Then I'm pretty sure that, I guess it depends on what kind of client you are. If you're, I don't know, if you were Apple and you had your account at Barclays, I guess you get a better service than we do. But
They're just very unable to be flexible, aren't they? And I find that on a day-to-day, and I guess an example would be with hair. If we had the same, I don't know, they blocked my card because I phoned up and they weren't able, I think I put my security number in or whatever wrong once, and their answer was, oh, well, in order to unblock it, you need to go to your nearest Barclays with a form of ID. So I live in the countryside, there's no nearest Barclays, I can't do that. Oh, well. I was like, well, I need to make payments for the whole team today. I need some kind of answer. There's nothing they could do. They're set in stone. Where I think if it was a same kind of scenario and it was Grantree holding it, we've got the flexibility in the way that we are to kind of go, okay, well, guys, what can we do? Can I get you to do, we can voice it and say it and get the situation sorted much easier because we are flexible, whereas they are very, it's very set in stone. There's nothing they can do. They can't help their customer any elsewhere. They can't do anything else. And that's their rules and regulations and their culture in that sense. That means they're not allowed to do that. Whereas we'd go as a Ferrari and find a workaround to make sure our clients are happy.
I'm not sure that that's a very good example. I think that banking regulations around the blocking pins are probably set externally, and having hundreds of team members that can freeze and unfreeze a card for clients is probably not a very good idea.
But it's not.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But I'm saying it's not because other ones, think of I think, are you and the ones who we've got like our Monzos and all the others, they can unblock it like that. You can literally phone up. I've had them unblock my thing over a chat. They just went, can you chat? Because they are more flexible. The way they work is so different. That's just like, why can Monzo do that? Why can Starling do that, but Barclays can't? And
this is a bit of I think we're veering off into some pretty choppy water really, because Monzo are moving fast and breaking things, but they're massively investing in risk management right now. That's a key area for them. What they're encountering at the moment is the speed of a startup is about to hit the regulatory force of the banking sector. Yeah. So I don't think it's necessarily
not culture,
the best
just different
comparisons to say, yeah, they can do it, so why can't Barclays? It's just that they haven't been collared for it yet. And it's really,
I think about how much easier it was for me to open a bank account in the Netherlands using Bunk. All of the Dutch banks were like, nope. Or yeah, you can have an expat bank account as a European citizen if you'll keep 10,000 euros on deposit at all times. Just keep 10,000 euros on deposit all time. Great. But these guys were just like, oh, you just fill in a thing and then we check that you have a European passport over a video call and then you're good to go. And they've been going for a couple of years. They're quite well set up there as a provider of current accounts. And it's just this is the thing where in I'm aware that we're running a minute over, so I'm going to try and draw it to a close. But this is a thing that people talk about a lot in digital transformation, agile, etc. Good people who talk about this say, look, digital transformation in your organisation does not mean that we take all of the forms that you currently have on paper and make electronic versions of those forms. Because what we don't want to do is that you have a wonderful shiny app for your bank or whatever it is, but then as soon as you encounter a problem, it's, please call us. The digital transformation is saying, did we need to fill in this form at all in the first place? Well, why is this form actually required? What is the rationale for it? What information do we need? Do we need all of this information from everybody? And so that's the way in which my experience of opening the bank account, where they were just like, you don't have to go into a branch to verify your identity. All we need you to do is hold up your passport under a light and tip it backwards and forwards to show that it's not been tampered with, and that is your identity verified. And when we need to verify your identity in the app, we just use the camera to scan your fingers and look at your fingerprints. So the thing that I want to finally wrap up by saying, is exploring the way in which actually our culture is an asset in our work with clients. It doesn't necessarily mean that in an individual sales conversation or in an individual delivery project, we're going to talk to the client, we're going to have a conversation about culture internally or culture with the client or whatever. But there's something about saying, well, what do we, this question of where do we want to position ourselves? What do we want our brand to be? What do we want people to associate with us? And thinking about, okay, well, what are our strengths? How are we somehow easier to work with? Because we're more respectable, more responsive, more flexible, more creative. What actually are the strengths of this that we can draw on? And it means when we're, producing content marketing, alongside the content that says we know about R&D, we're interested in innovation. Here's all this good content that proves that, saying, hey, we also have this content which says we're really interested in high-performing teams. We're really interested in work that's about really getting to know and understand the client. Here's why we're experts at that. We don't have to talk about, flexible working hours or whatever, but I think that there are advantages to the way that we work that we can start to play on more explicitly. And step by step exploring this, we give ourselves the confidence to start to see, actually, where does this become a natural part of the conversation? And to me, I think you point to it well when you say, the client is interested in, well, who's doing the work and what's their track record? And who's doing the work and what's their track record, for me, is really tied up in the, how do we work together? How do we do awesome work together? What's going on here? There may be ways that we can talk about it, but it seems like an interesting challenge for us to have. So, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, your point about marketing stuff, I agree. It's definitely the culture. They
Thank you.
didn't want, basically, they refused to make those